All right, I'm going to go ahead and get some folks checked in. Let's see that we have is it Temmel? Andrew Temmel here. Mr. Temmel, if you could take yourself off of mute, make sure your equipment's working properly, and let me know who you're representing here today.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Temmel. I represent A. Temmel and Associates, the applicant.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, let's see that we also have Trey Sheldon. Trey, are you with us? Hi, Trey. Welcome. Trey is a member of our zoning department. And then I also have a Samuel Abernathy.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Mr. Abernathy. Could you tell me who you're representing here today?
Yeah, I own 6220 Alpha Street.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, great. And Mr. Abernathy, do you intend on providing any testimony here today?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you intend on providing any testimony here today?
No, I just want to stay informed of what's going on.
Sure. Okay. Welcome. All right, Mr. Temmel, are you expecting anyone else to join us here today on the applicant owner side, or provide any testimony here today on the applicant owner side?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started then. I need to read through our hearing script. This will basically just cover the procedure for the hearing, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So this is the May 17th, 2023 session of the Zoning Hearing Examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the Zoning Hearing Examiner for the City of Cincinnati. I'll preside over this hearing. Case before us today is case number ZH20230054. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and any opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and supplemental rules of the Zoning Hearing Examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any potential opposing party would like to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. If there were anyone here from the public, they would have an opportunity to speak after the applicant had presented its case. I will give our zoning plans examiner, Trey Sheldon, an opportunity to provide any testimony in addition to his staff report. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to that testimony that was made in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make any closing statements. So for our purposes here today, Mr. Temmel, I'll just give you an opportunity. I put each of these projects on for this hour, and so I'm gonna basically have you tell me about the project's background you think is important, and then of course why you think I should grant the requested relief and why the requested relief is appropriate. I've done these before where there's several different properties we're talking about at the same time. I think that's doable, but what's important is that when we're talking about an aspect of a particular property that is unique to that address or to that lot, that we just sort of identify that as we go through. So if you're talking about why the the special exception, for instance, for the front yard is appropriate, if you could just make sure that you're referring to the actual address and the lot when you're talking about a particular aspect or circumstance of the properties.
Okay.
After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or make any comments. In the event of any technical difficulties with the Zoom technology, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those issues on the fly, but to the extent there's some defect that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with this hearing, I may continue or postpone the hearing to my discretion. All right. Last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. So,
Before you do, David, just one kind of reminder to Mr. Temmel. It might be helpful to provide a little bit of background for Mr. Sturkey as to how this project changed, because it was previously approved at a previous hearing. But
correct.
You had a major retaining wall and other things, and a common entry drive that then kind of teed out to the things. And you just might explain how this is different, how how the scope of the project's been reduced. I just didn't want you to forget that because it is.
Thank
in
you,
the
Trey.
context. It's in the context of my staff report.
Yes, thank you, Trey. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome, sir.
Thanks, Rick. So I need to swear on all the witnesses that intend on testifying here today. So if that is you, if you could raise your right hand, I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I
I
did.
do.
Okay, great. All right. Mr. Timmel, are you ready to proceed?
Sure. As Trey mentioned, we were previously approved just prior to the pandemic for a relief on setbacks and the cut and fill. The project has changed considerably due to economics and to the amount of stormwater runoff was also a problem. There was a tremendous amount of concrete. The driveways actually came across the back. They did. There was one single drive that then teed off and came across the back of the property with a long retaining wall across the entire back of the property, which it was approved, but again, economically did not make sense since that period of time. So we've gone to 3 individual driveways, and with all of the site work, as far as not actual site work on the site, but with our engineers, we're now down to a retaining wall on 6220 Alpha Street across the rear with an average height of about 4 feet. And we have also one other retaining wall on the western side of 6216 with an average height of 36 inches. So retaining wall wise, this has really helped reduce that amount by having individual driveways going to each one. We've also, with the request for the variance to go to 10-foot setback, will get us off of that hillside in the rear and really help with the city's concern with the hillside district, hillside overlay district, and with any other concerns the city would have.
Mr. Timmel, could you
yeah.
talk a little bit more about that? So you said it'll get you off of the hill. Could you tell me more about the site and why that front setback is important?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So there is considerable amount of topography on this site from the front of the street all the way to the rear of the site. It is I think 30 feet or more from the street all the way up to the rear yards of these houses. So by bringing the houses forward by 15 feet, we're reducing that impact on those hillsides considerably because again, per the site plans, the topography levels out or has a plateau somewhere around where we have the 10-foot setback. The depth of the houses was also something we considered when we were designing these. Again, without the garage in the rear that was previously approved, we now have the garage under, and that again reduces the footprint that we were putting on these hillsides. The footprint of the house is only 27 feet deep. Previously, it was over 40 feet deep. So we've taken into a lot of consideration on the hillside and carefully constructed a floor plan that works for people like Mr. Abernathy, who was on 6220, and the other 2 people that are going to purchase from us on 6216, 6218. Did I answer your question, David?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to tell me about the project, or why you think the relief should be granted?
Yes, again, the variance is something that is very critical in my estimation to the development of the site and to the city's consideration with hillsides. That relief is obvious. As far as the cut and fill situation, we plan on removing that from the site and taking it to a local Hefner's who takes dirt. So that's where it'll be taken out of. We've already done estimates. Trey's got estimates on what those are from our engineer of what we'll be taking off the site. But yes, I think it'll be a great asset to the city. You're looking at houses that'll average somewhere around 500,000, three of them, $1.5 million for three houses there. So, and also, I don't know that anyone was there prior to when we bought it, but this was a dumping ground. If anybody has gone back up Alpha, it is a very off the beaten path street, if you will. And we cleaned up considerable amount of dump that was on that street. And I've talked to a number of the neighbors, and they're excited and very happy to have homeowners instead of a dump site.
Okay. The excavation and fill, I see that it's slightly different for each property.
Right.
Can you tell me more about that and any potential impacts to the hillside as a result of some of the excavation and fill? I think one of them is 27 feet, right?
Yeah. Again, the topography changes as you go east to west. So 6220 is the farthest east. That is the one that has the majority of the retaining wall there. That will require most of the dirt to come off of it. And then as you go west to 6218, 6216, the topography levels out a little bit more, and the amount of fill, cut and fill, reduces rather significantly to where we can raise the houses up and still get a driveway that is accessible at about a little less than 14% grade into each of the garages. So that works, and yet it reduces the amount of cut we have to take out of each lot.
Gotcha. It looks like on the 6218,
middle one, correct.
yeah, is that the one that's 27 feet of excavation?
Trey, do you have that in front of you? I don't have that in front of me.
I'm looking at Trey's staff report here.
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to jump in and help clarify here?
If you wouldn't mind, Trey, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
For one thing, David, in moving these forward, let's go back to the beginning. The original project, when it was approved, consisted of a one lot in the middle that was 75 feet in width, and the two parcels on either side were 50 each. As the project was redesigned, both as a result of economics and the stormwater impacts, from that large retaining wall and driveway expanse, to accomplish both those goals, reduce the cost, and make stormwater management content. The project was reimagined during COVID, and the lots were consolidated and then re-subdivided to be 58 and change in 58 and a half, I believe, in width. This enabled, as Mr. Tummel explained before, the previous homes on the side, the bookend ones at 60, at 16 and 20, basically, addresses were deeper because their lots were narrower to accommodate the same, I hope that makes sense, to accommodate the same roughly square footage for the house and living space. They had to be narrower and deeper. In redesigning and subdividing this 3 equally sized lots, they were able to go a little wider with the houses rather than deep and not as far into the hillside.
So yeah, real quick, Trey. So the relief that was granted back in 2019, that gave greater excavation and fill relief than
it was a greater single cut because the houses were back further into the hill, and you had this large retaining wall there. However, on the middle lot, and this was what I was going to get to, as you brought the houses forward, the one at 6220 came out of the hillside, part of the rear of the lots in the hillside, but the house itself and the retaining wall are not in the hillside. So a small amount of grading has to occur on the back of it in the hillside, but it was less than the 8 feet. It was like 3 or 4 feet or something. It was a compliant amount. So it didn't I can't remember the exact amount. I think maybe 5 or something, but it didn't require hillside relief. So in that instance, they literally were able to bring the entire house out of the hillside overlay. That's why we're just here for a special exception. on 6220 as to the front yard. The other thing to put in context is as that very large retaining wall, very lengthy and tall retaining wall was removed from the scope of the project, Mr. Abercrombie, who did the engineering for this, Craig Abercrombie, he and I discussed this numerous times, going back on this project when the permits came in, and part of the reason that number is so large, David, that 27 feet, is because it's in my staff report, but there's sort of a little mini gully, if you will. The natural topography has sort of a little depression roughly behind to the east side of 6218 and going into 6220 a little bit. That is a place where if it was left in that part of the retaining wall addressed that in the previous iteration of this project. Here, because that long retaining wall has been removed from the one across the whole back of the lot, the whole behind the properties has been removed from the scope. In order to not have that become just a washout gully, that they have to feather the soil in there. I think about 2 feet between 1 and 2 feet of soil. And the way our cumulative excavation and fill is counted, that pretty much like doubled what the apparent cut and fill was. I don't have any choice but to do it the way the code tells me to. And because it's cumulative, that like low light grading up there to not have that gully, that little depression turn into just a washout.
Right.
They had to, for stormwater purposes, they had to grade that out and level that. So that number is what I'm getting at is that number is far bigger than what it appears for the actual excavation for the house. It's only because they're feathering some of that soil up in kind of back dragging the soil up in there, many feet, maybe 50, 60 feet behind the house.
Yeah. So David,
the 6218.
The key word there was cumulative. And that's why that number yeah, exactly. Trey had to do what he had to do, but it's the cumulative that caused that to look like such a big number when in reality it really isn't.
Sure. And the greatest cut is 10 feet at the back of the basement. Is that right? At 6218, I mean.
Correct. I think it is. Wait, let me see. Yes, correct.
So Trey, there was you said a gully was like a depression in the back of the lots that needed fill.
It's on the side.
You can see it in the on my staff report. It's in the topographic image, like in the site plan. If you look at 6218 particularly, you'll see the kind of darker lines, which are a couple of like 1 to somewhere between 1 and 2 feet of soil that's kind of filling that in. But if you look at the lighter lines, you can see that it's kind of a little depression. And the engineer and Mr. Abercrombie, in working with stormwater management, determined that if they were removing that large retaining wall that was a problem for runoff, was a problem before, this would, with substantial rain, if you didn't level this up and put
Everything was go there.
Landscaping in there, that would basically turn into a gully eventually. I mean, it would just wash out. And so he had to grade that out in order to not have it turn into a mini ravine or just a gully. I don't know how else to put it, but a washout gully. So that's why that feathering or back dragging of the soil had to be done in there. It's not like it's a creek, but it could have become one. So
Yeah,
Gotcha.
very easily.
that's essentially what Mr. Abercrombie, and he's obviously not here, but I'll let the drawing. I don't want to get into a hearsay issue, but we communicated at length on this project, and it's depicted right there for you on the site plan with the topography showing. And I think it's rational as to why that's necessary.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Tummel, is there anything else you wanted to say before I let Trey review any more aspects of the staff report?
I'm good. Thank you very much for asking, David. Good.
Trey, anything else you want to provide?
Well, the other is the context of the property in relation to the pavement, and I discussed that here because granted, for in the hillside, we don't really do as much the neighborhood compatibility part, but because of building envelopes and so on, it should be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. I think the hillside guidelines kind of anticipate that, certainly with regard to stepping and other things. And so what I'm getting at here is that the right of way is very, very wide for the width of the street. If you see in the aerial image of that, basically you have like 15 to 50, I think maybe as much as 20 something feet of just ground between the north part of the pavement. It varies a little bit because it's more extreme distance. It's a greater distance at 6216, I believe, than it is at 6220. But because the street kind of goes at a little bit of an angle. But essentially what I'm getting at is that to any person driving up that street, your layperson, a neighbor or whatever, these 10-foot setbacks are not going to appear to be 10-foot setbacks.
Right.
They're going to look like they're 30 feet or so, 25 to 30 feet back from the street.
Because the street is wider.
Yeah,
The right of way
narrower.
is a lot wider than the street. So
Yeah,
you've
the
got
right of
like-
way is a 50. I'm sorry, Trey. The right of way is a 50, and the street, we had the fire department come out there and sign off because there was concern of the width of the street. So what Trey's trying to say is it's a 50-foot right of way, so there's like 25 feet of extra right of way that that the homeowners will be able to use to get up and into their garages. So it's going to appear more like it's a 35-foot setback than it is a 10. But yes, it's appearance-wise, it's going to be gorgeous because of it's more setback than a 10.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to picture that because the only pictures I can find of the actual street is just, looks very narrow, and it's,
Yeah. If you were in Cages, David, if you wanted to do it, if you go into Cages and do the aerial image, like the 2022 aerial image, and do the and hit the property layers over on the right, you'll see property layers. Pop that on and you'll see how far the street is from the actual property line.
Yeah, it's pretty significant.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the driveway
Yeah.
will span that whole thing. So to a layperson, just somebody's driving down that street, when these houses are built, they're going to represent as being set back far further from the road than this 10 feet. They're not going to be 10 feet from the road. They're 10 feet from the right of way, the property line.
Right.
But I don't think that's why I kind of say we don't normally kind of look at the neighborhood compatibility because that's part of the general standards here. But rationally speaking, for you to understand how a neighbor or a member of the public would perceive this, it's going to be perceived as a much bigger setback than 10 feet. And the driveways are longer. Andrew, how long are the driveways?
Well, I don't want you to say that. I'm just worried.
How long are the driveways, Andrew? They're like 30.
Yeah,
How long are the driveways? Are they like?
yeah,
30,
they're
35?
they're 35. They're 30, 35 feet. Yep. Which really helped the slope of the driveways again. So the grade into them is pretty minimal.
That actually allowed them to they brought the houses as far forward as they could and still maintain the below the 15% grade that zoning limits it. And that's one of the more rational parts of the zoning code, because if you start getting you can seek relief for it, but I don't know that we would support it too much, because you start getting into a point where something, a vehicle, especially a rescue vehicle or a fire vehicle, they bottom out on the back, you know what I mean, on the street.
Right.
If you start to get a really steep driveway, then you have access problems. So that's not some arbitrary percentage.
Right.
So these longer driveways and the location of the house, they basically brought the houses as far forward as they could to minimize the hillside, but still maintain that 14%, that you achieved.
Yeah, we're the most of any of them is 14, and a couple of them are under, like 12.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Trey?
Not unless you have any other questions, but I thought it was important to, get a handle on that right of way thing, because it really makes a difference in the project, both in terms of how these would present and also how they were able to be in compliance, having a safe driveway.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Trey. Mr. Timmel, anything in response to any of Trey's comments or in closing or otherwise?
No, just David, if you got any concerns or something comes up, you've got my email and my phone, I'm sure, in the application. Happy to answer any questions you have so we can get your decision and start getting some homeowners into the city.
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, having a chance to review the application materials and staff report, I think based on that, based on the testimony I've heard here today, that I am inclined to approve these applications. I need to formalize that in a written decision, which usually does take about 2 weeks. As soon as you have that as soon as I finish the written decision, I put it into a PDF and I email it to everybody who's in the hearing here today. And so you really have a copy of it. Just moments after it's complete, you can work with Trey at that point on getting the permitting approved. Yeah, if I have any questions, I'll let you know. But I think that this seems reasonable and is a reasonable exception to the zoning code. So
I did want to let Mr. Tummel know that, I'm sorry to interrupt, David. I did want to let Mr. Tummel know I'm going to be out of town, out of the office for a period of time, returning for about 2 weeks, returning on June 12th.
Okay.
And so if David's decision comes in before that, I'll let my colleague Wes.
Yeah.
So he worked with you on the original project.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I'll try to let him know so that when that decision, and David, would you mind making a note of that to copy him on
Sure.
the decision?
I mean, I usually copy Emily on these as well. So,
but he's familiar with the project, so he would be able to, you know, I mean, she gets very busy with other stuff, so he would be able to flip those permits based upon your decision for Mr. Tummel.
Thank you, Wes, for letting me know that.
Yeah, I just didn't want to hold it's been quite a while
Right.
with this, get in front of David, and I didn't want to delay you by, you know, if his decision comes out here and, you know, the first of the month or something, I didn't want you to have an additional 10 or 12 days of waiting time.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
all right. Mr. Timmel, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. If you'd like a status update on the decision, you can also just reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to give you an update.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it
Okay.
very much.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Yep.
We are
Okay,
adjourned.
Mr. Abernathy.